The other day I was sketching ideas for a new painting, and I thought I'd share my process at its simplest. Not for a client piece, not for a complex illustration with multiple characters and an elaborate background, but just a portrait with a surreal environment. Let's chat a bit about compositions and what kind of sketches help me when I prepare, and maybe you'll grab your own sketchbooks to draw along with me. Does an idea ever just pop into your mind fully formed? Usually my illustrations take me quite some time. I might have an idea for a concept or some specific details, but still need to figure out how it all comes together. But sometimes that very first impression, that very first sketch is already what I want, and that was the case here too. It's very simple, so that helped, of course. The simpler the idea, the easier it is to capture in my first sketch. I still ended up sketching more and more ideas, just to see if I didn't stumble across a more interesting option that resonates with me, or maybe an idea for the future while I'm at it. This painting is for a small online exhibit as well as this month's Patreon print and not a book illustration. So here I'm more focused on just capturing an emotion, an overall mood, and the storytelling is secondary. I realized how big that shift in genre is when I sketch. The very same inspiration, the same elements, but a completely different direction in the sketches. I try to turn that into a little exercise for myself. What would this idea look like as a book cover illustration or an interior page, as a splash art piece or fantasy card game illustration more focused on action, or as a surreal figure or a more classical portrait? I'd love to try this as a proper study session one day, taking an idea and then adapting it to different genres and art styles. What if my usual gothic vampires are in a Baroque painting, a game splash art piece, on a melancholic poetry book cover, or a vintage fantasy book? It's less about the actual painting style or execution of it and more about how all of these would come with different compositions and conventions that shape the idea. The theme for the exhibit is Star Child, and it's intended for all kinds of celestial motifs, from constellations and zodiac-inspired art to planets and moons, which brought a Korean creation myth to mind. In the beginning, there were 2 suns and 2 moons, so the days were scorching hot and the nights exceedingly cold, and to bring balance to the world, Haebyol had to destroy one of each. Haebyol, son of the king of heaven Jeonji-wang, took his bow and arrows to shoot 1 moon and 1 sun, and I wanted to play with that idea, the moment of choosing which one to keep. If this were a book illustration style, I'd have come up with a way to show Haebyol himself posing with his bow maybe, or even one of the suns already shattered in the background as I experimented with my sketches here. So an illustration of the actual narrative of the myth, but I'm going for this more surreal painting inspired by the myth instead of depicting it, So it's more about symbols instead of storytelling. Illustrations that I draw for clients come with a lot more preparation than this, so it was refreshing and relaxing to just go with my first idea, and the only other sketches I made before starting my painting were costume and character design studies. I used a large sepia pencil by Color so that I wouldn't get lost in detail. While the myth is of course older and not placed in a specific point in time, my character design is inspired by the Baekje and Shilla kingdoms. I am very interested in this part of Korean history. I'm really sad that I actually couldn't manage to visit an exhibit on the mainland that was going on for a long time in Gyeongju, all about the Shilla period and especially about the golden crowns and ornaments of that time. So while the costuming might be less immediately recognizable compared to the Joseon era hanbok, I kind of wanted to play around with these different time periods, giving them all a fantasy and mythology twist, and then kind of detached from the actual history. This isn't historically accurate. I'm combining different influences, basing most of the hairstyles more on old Saguk historical dramas. I'm keeping the actual textile simple and a bit vague, as I want the focus to be on the face, the two moons, the hands, and the star patterns in the background in that order. So too elaborate costuming might distract from that. pull the viewer's eyes more towards the face, I wanted to use ornaments in the hair and earrings for the costuming, instead of elaborate clothing, which would pull the focus downwards. There are some amazing pieces from the burial site of King Muryong of Paekje and his queen. Their crown, ornaments, and even bracelets and earrings, so I'm sketching those here to make myself familiar with their overall shapes. I found this in-between step really helpful when working with references. Sketching the reference to understand it better and then using both my sketches and the original reference when I go to work on the actual painting. Around this time, I also created a simple 3D scene based on all my ideas and sketches. A lot of what I use in DAZ 3D and Blender is a bit improvised. I do buy some assets whenever there's a sale, but my selection is still limited. I use the blue icy landscape background instead of a galaxy or nebula, a simple medieval dress as a placeholder for hanbok of that time period to get some information on the color and texture of a blue textile, and a modern hair updo instead of anything Korean. For the face, I experimented with some of the existing models, as well as morphing eyes, nose, and overall face shape into different options. I always make multiple versions of the face because I don't want to base my painting on a single 3D model, instead giving myself a rough guideline on the lighting that I can then combine with other reference photos. In a way, this video shows the bare minimum of preparation and sketches I can get away with. I'm not great at just diving in, so a couple rough composition thumbnail sketches, some quick character item or environment exploration, and now a small color test. I'm using cobalt blue, cobalt green, raw umber, yellow ochre and alizarin crimson, titanium white, a bit of titanium buff, and kind of just tested those out in a circular arrangement here. Something I've picked up from the oil painting class by Ryan Pancoast, even though I work in acrylics. An additional paint I'm using is a new shade. I'm trying out acrylic paints by Sennelier, adding them to my usual paint palettes, choosing shades that I don't already own the golden acrylics version of. The ultramarine blue green shade is actually a key part of this painting and what I built the rest of the color palette around. I'm very excited to see how it goes, but in my tiny color test here, well, everything turned out too saturated and intense. Funnily enough, this color sketch is more of a, oh, I shouldn't do it like this sketch. I didn't like the bright red of her lips or high contrast overall, and especially disliked the two red suns I tried to add in the distant background as they messed up my overall lighting idea and pulled too much of the focus backwards. But even a sketch like this is valuable. Knowing what not to aim for can be just as helpful as the opposite, and I now know that I want to desaturate my colors a lot and keep the overall value range high key. I originally planned to paint on watercolor paper again, but after over 3 months of pretty much non-stop illustrations on that very same surface, I just found myself staring at my options and not feeling excited about any of them. This is a personal piece, something simpler to recharge and relax with, and I felt the itch to paint on canvas again. I haven't touched a brush to canvas in such a long time, but I found one at the right size among my treasure hoard of art materials. I added 2 coats of fresh gesso to make sure the canvas feels nice to paint on, and that's it. A little prep here, a little prep there, kind of spaced out over a week as I was working on something else during the day. And now I am ready to go. And I hope you found some of these sketches and color tests helpful, even if you're a more spontaneous and intuitive artist. Let me know if you'd like to see the actual painting process of this. I've already shared the work in progress pictures over on Patreon, and I hope to see you again in my next art video.